I have concluded that the very high threshold required for the invocation of the Act was met.
Okay, so I was there last year at this time for the Freedom Convoy 2022. I cannot fathom. Let me wrap it up in one sentence. Our government shot into unarmed citizens who loved Canada, bearing the Canadian flags, thousands of them, nonviolent, no looting, no lighting on fire, no Black Lives Matter routines going on. Unarmed citizens, you shot into the crowd, tear gas, you ran over them with your horses, and all of this, you're saying, was justified. Ridiculous. And this Rouleau, isn't he a friend? And possibly, I've heard that he's a relative of Trudeau. You can't get someone who's completely independent? Is this accountability? Is that ridiculous? I think that's ridiculous. It's like, me calling for a court case and the judge is my dad's friend, or the judge is my uncle. Oh, I wonder how he's going to sign. Well, if you ever want to be at a Christmas party again in your lifetime, Uncle Joe, maybe you better side with my version of events. So how this is a schmoz kangaroo court nonsense, absolute nonsense. If I can do a quick share on what Maxime Bernier has put up today. He said today Justice Paul Rouleau released his verdict on Trudeau's use of the Emergencies Act. It's not there? My share's not there? Oh, let me try to do it again then. It was just there, wasn't it? All right, here we go. How's that? Rouleau concluded that Trudeau's use of the act was justified. In a delirious statement, I like the way that Maxime said that, delirious statement, he claims that it was reasonable to believe that this peaceful and joyful protest posed a threat to the security of Canada. LOL. Wow. I have to say I'm profoundly disappointed, but not surprised. Justice Rouleau was handpicked by Trudeau to oversee the inquiry. We can't forget that Rouleau has a history as a Liberal activist and worked with former Prime Minister John Turner. The commission was not independent, as it should have been. It was Liberals investigating Liberals. Hilarious. You're all a big joke. You are just a big joke. I need to be investigated, so I'm going to call my best friend and my cousin, Ridiculous. Is anyone really surprised that Liberals protect their own? He says, at the end of the day, the findings of Rouleau don't really matter. We all know that Trudeau would not have resigned even if the commission had found he overstepped his powers. Of course he wouldn't. We all know that Jagmeet Singh would not have held Trudeau accountable by withdrawing his support and forcing an election. Of course he wouldn't. Jagmeet Singh is just another Liberal, but he loves to complain against the Liberals, but yet he's just a Liberal. No matter the findings of this illegitimate inquiry, Trudeau's actions of 1 year ago exposed him as the tyrant he is. He crushed peaceful protesters with police horses. He threw people in jail on false charges. He froze people's bank accounts without due process. The Freedom Convoy forced Trudeau to show his true colors, and that might be one of the greatest things that we actually got to see. It exposed the opposition, the NDP, the Conservatives. Not one Conservative out there trying to meet with the people. What about a meeting? The Bloc, all of them, all of the elected officials did not stand with the people. Not one had the grace or the strength to do it, as incompetent and incapable of holding the government to account. Oh, that's so nice. He actually said my name. I know it's a form letter, but he called me personally. Laura-Lynn, we must replace these corrupt politicians. And of course, he talks about the People's Party, whom I believe in because Maxime Bernier was down there. But it's not about who did stand in a way. It's about how we were let down by those who should have stood and never did. And never did. I'm very grateful to have been out there. So we have the Western Standard article discusses Commissioner Paul Rouleau's ruling on Liberals invoking the Emergencies Act for Freedom convoy. So Commissioner finds Liberals met threshold for invoking the Emergencies Act for Freedom convoy. Have a look at that today. Okay, let's have a look at the excerpts. Okay, you might have to put it big so I can read that. All right. So these comments, as well as remarks the Prime Minister made at a press conference on January 31st, were interpreted by many as referring to all Freedom Convoy participants. This served to energize the protesters, hardening their resolve and further embittering them towards government authorities. I expect that the Prime Minister was intending to refer to the small number of people who were expressing racist, extremist, or otherwise reprehensible views, rather than to all Freedom Convoy participants. It may well be that his comments were taken out of context, including by some media. However, in my view, more of an effort should have been made by government leaders at all levels during the protests to acknowledge that the majority of protesters were exercising their fundamental democratic rights. Okay. Another one? Okay. A related scope issue that I heard evidence about pertained to joint bank accounts. An individual who had no connection to the protest could still have had their assets frozen under the EEMO if they held their accounts jointly with a protester. It is not difficult to imagine a scenario where an individual would participate in the protests without the involvement of their spouse or indeed against the spouse's wishes. It is clearly unjust for individuals with no connection to the protests to have their accounts frozen. The difficulty, however, is that this appears to have been unavoidable. None of the parties made submissions on how the EEMO could have been structured to avoid this consequence, and I am unable to think of an obvious mechanism myself. The question then is whether the inevitable impact of the EEMO on innocent third parties rendered the measure inappropriate. Again, and not without hesitation, I conclude that the measures were still appropriate. Excluding joint accounts from the EEMO would have allowed the protesters to easily and quickly circumvent it by using or creating joint accounts. So that's more of the commissioner's findings. Yeah. Too bad, so sad. You might not have even been in agreement. Hey, maybe your spouse went to Ottawa and you weren't happy about it at all, but oh well, your money's frozen too. And oh, maybe you voted for Justin Trudeau. Oh, it doesn't matter. We're just going to freeze your accounts. I'm also satisfied that he says, this commissioner, right? I'm also satisfied that there was misinformation about the Freedom Convoy, which was used as a basis to unfairly discredit all protesters. In one example, protesters were blamed for an act of arson in an apartment building, which the police later confirmed had no links to the protests, which where there was misinformation and disinformation about the protests, it was prone to amplification in news media. OPP Superintendent Pat Morris testified that as the officer leading the collection of intelligence for the OPP, what he was seeing in the media did not always reflect what the intelligence was showing. Of course it didn't. People would come down there, and they'd say, we just saw on the news what this was about, so we thought that we'd show up. And of course, nothing was the same as what you would see on the Canadian news. Oh, you want me to read that? So protests are messy and some level of unlawfulness can be expected. I do not consider that the protests became an occupation as of the first Saturday. The protesters had in effect been invited to park their trucks for the weekend in various locations in the downtown core. By Monday, however, when they refused to leave, the invitation was clearly revoked. In addition, it was clear that the assembly was no longer peaceful, given the widespread intimidation of residents and the fact that their ability to live and work had been fundamentally disrupted. It was apparent that the police were unable to control the protest and limit unlawful conduct in the protest area. What a joke. Unlawful conduct. The beanie bags being thrown at us, that was unlawful conduct. Shooting people, yeah, beanie bags. Shooting people in the face, one guy through his cheek, other people very harmed by your little rubber bullets, could have killed someone, could have ruined someone's eyesight for life. Did y'all care? No, you didn't. You shot unarmed people that were on the streets that they pay taxes to be on, our capital. What a joke this is. So is that pretty much what we have for that, JT? So can we do number 7, the images NACI, the College of Physicians and Doctors? That one's safe? Okay. So the College of Physicians and Doctors documents are guidance, not rules. CPSO? Yet they're firing doctors and employees for not getting shots. Okay, so generally, there are very few acceptable medical exemptions to the COVID-19 vaccination. Examples include an allergist, immunologist, confirmed severe allergy, or anaphylactic reaction to a previous dose of a COVID-19 vaccine or to any of its components that cannot be mitigated, or a diagnosed episode of myocarditis, pericarditis after receipt of an mRNA vaccine. So this is basically why anyone would be able to get an exemption to get the shot. But the doctors are all being required. If you find yourself in this situation, clearly and sensitively explain to your patient that you cannot provide them with a note or form along with the reasons why. Okay. At this point, the physicians and the college find common cause. The college agrees that the statements are properly characterized as guidance documents, not binding rules. As the Court of Appeal confirmed 25 years earlier. Okay. So basically, they're saying it's not binding. Is that right? It's not. Yeah, we're going to fire you, but it's not actually, it's not, it's just guidance, but do it or else. So that's basically the tyranny. This is really why the truckers went. So many of those truckers, they had their vaccines, they had done what they had to do, but it was like never ending. They were going to have to keep getting those. And what happened to my body, my choice? This whole thing was about the tyrannical imposing of having to get a medical having to get a medical procedure, call it a shot, that we would have to all get that, or what? Or we didn't get to go to the restaurant, or we didn't get to go to the library, or we weren't allowed to go to our kids' soccer game, or we couldn't enter our children's school. These are all things that happened, or we couldn't have a job anymore. So we're going to have to say goodbye now to, I can do Freedom Organizer Tom Marazzo. He is consulting lawyers on suing Jagmeet Singh for defamation. And Tom Marazzo, I just want to say, he was one of the people that spoke at the Freedom Convoy when we would have these media scrums. So you'd go and you'd hear what the latest was happening. And I just really loved Tom Marazzo. I saw him in tears. I saw his heart. I saw him the day that they were moving in and shooting unarmed citizens. And I saw the record where he said, we told them we're leaving. The army dudes, the big ugly army dudes, the police, everybody had been told that the truckers were leaving, and yet they came in and acted like bullies and crazy people, shooting unarmed people. I thought that wasn't allowed. Do you know, our prime minister has bragged basically on camera that you're not allowed to shoot people who might enter your home, to break in, to harm someone. You don't really have that right in Canada. But I guess if you're the government, you can shoot people who don't have any weapons, who are carrying Canadian flags, who are standing up for their rights. Shame. Dark day. a very dark day in Canada. God help you. So we're going to let you go now. On YouTube, we have put the description of where we're going to our next guest. We're going to be discussing even more difficulties that are going on in our world, injustices and wrongs, crimes against humanity. So we'll leave you now, YouTube. Please come. We're going to have an incredible interview right now, and we'd like to see you on the other side.